Okay, we're talking about rule of thirds. And in this section, I'm going to go over rule of thirds one more time, but I also want you to see it because you're going to put into your slideshow a picture of either something you've taken or one that is from the internet, and you're going to show me your understanding of rule of thirds through this. And so let me give you an example so that you feel confident about this. Here's a picture when it says, Mr. Jensen says rule of thirds. What does that mean? Mr. Jensen, I'm still confused. What does it mean? Well, the good news is we're going to do a showcase of this, and I'm going to show your guys' photos as well so we can kind of give some examples. Now, with photography, don't be embarrassed. Nobody's going to be a good photographer. There might be a couple that are taking okay photos, but none of us are professional photographers. Don't feel like you have to be perfect. The whole idea of sharing our photos is just, hey, here's what I understand now. Please don't be embarrassed. There's going to be no shaming. There's no comments. Nobody's going to rat you out for being a bad photographer. That doesn't exist. All of us suck. So you're in the right class. We're all bad photographers in a sense that we're going to be getting better as we go at this thing. So in this showcase, don't feel bad. Wow, that kid looks so much like Mr. Jensen. Because it's Mr. Jensen's little kid. Walter. Here's Walter sitting at the lake this last summer with a fishing pole and this beautiful sky behind him. It's the evening, and it just looks gorgeous. Now, I wanted to use this as an example of rule of thirds. I took a picture of Walter with my cell phone, just candid, meaning just right there. Hey, Walter, give me a smile. He was standing on a lock doing some fishing. How is this rule of thirds? Well, remember, we take red lines and we split the picture into three different sections equally. We split it down the center, there's a section, and each side has a section. The top, the middle, and the bottom have sections. And we've got these sections of what we call rule of thirds. Now, in this one, I put Walter right in the bottom right-hand corner. I set him right there where those lines intersect, because in these intersections, this is where our eyes will spend more time looking. And so when you looked at this picture, you saw Walter, and it felt comfortable to your brain to look at this picture because I strategically lined him up on this third. And I had this crosshairs so that you see him in the bottom right third. And you're saying, oh, that's a good picture. And then I used some of my framing of this top line to kind of make sure that all the sky was in the top area, where the water and land kind of come together is in the middle area. And then that log and water down here is in that bottom third section. So I kind of sectioned it out like that using those rule of thirds. Here's an example of the same exact place, but it's just a landscape photo. That's all it is. Now, this is a beautiful photo I just took with my camera. It's on my phone, and I didn't dress anything up. This is just a raw picture. But what I did was I looked at it and I said, okay, I want the top section to be the sky. I kind of want this middle section to be this ridge, and then the bottom section to be the cactus, or not cactus, what am I talking about? Cattails down in here, kind of this swampy section. And so when I did that, I lined this thing up with my rule of thirds line, and I created kind of a spacing right here where I made sure that that cactus line that meets right here, it's kind of a straight line, isn't crooked, so that people looking at it don't feel like they're looking at a sideways or crooked picture. So I lined it up so it's pretty smooth. And then I did the same thing up here with the sky. And then I just kind of put these lines down the center. There's not really much in the thirds, but if you look to the middle of this, there's not a whole lot going on in here. I mean, the sun's kind of to the right a little bit, but using that rule of thirds so that you can line this up. Here's another example. The areas where the tree meets the water could be a little bit more maybe towards the top line, but what I really wanted you to focus on was this cool piece of tree coming out of the water right here that had been stripped of its branches. Looked kind of cool. And so I got this in focus here. I put it right on that rule third. Even though this is crooked coming out of the water, I made sure that this line back here where the water meets the tree line was lined up nicely with this red line so that it wasn't crooked itself, so that you don't feel like you were looking through the lens of a crooked picture. It feels like it's straight, and this feels like it's crooked for the right reasons. And then you could see obviously lily pads and things like that in the front ground here. using that rule of thirds line. Here's one of Walter. So what do you think my subject was in this photo? Well, it wasn't Walter, it was the catfish, because that's what you're looking at, is this catfish that he caught. His face in the background's fun because your first thought is you're looking at this catfish right here. So I put that head right there on that thirds line, and then I put his face looking at that catfish. I lined it up in that top section. In the middle of the photo, it's just his life jacket. It doesn't really matter. That catfish he was holding, I lined up the best that I could on that rule of thirds line. Over here on this right thirds, there's nothing. His body kind of falls into the center thirds. And then that was my lining that I used to make this happen. Maybe his mouth was lined up with the catfish eye because, makes you want to go, ugh. You could see his face. He's just kind of like, this is so weird. I'm holding a catfish. Candid photo from the summer. Here's one of him on his graduation. I used that right line of rule of thirds, and I lined him up the best that I could. I wanted to get his whole body in there, so I didn't put him all the way up here on this. I mean, I could crop this down and get his face right where this section is if I wanted to, but I wanted to leave his whole body in there. However, I used that right line to line him up. And then I kind of made sure that this background and this line were lined up so that it wasn't crooked at all. And there you go. That's how you line up using the rule of thirds. Here's a picture of the first time my wife ever made a cake. It's a birthday cake she made for Walter that blew my mind. I couldn't believe she did this. It did about lose her sanity on it 10 hours later, but she made this fish edible and all this kind of stuff as well. And it was so cool looking. So I took a picture of it. And what I did is I used a little bit of rule of thirds. So the fish face, again, kind of becomes the featured thing with the eye here. And I lined up this line with the length of this fish so that that fish was kind of in that second top part. The cake part of it here was in the middle section. And then the bottom section down here was in that lower section of the thirds. And then that's how you kind of look at a picture and you kind of line it up just like that. Now, when you take your picture, it's your turn to do this, but I need you to know that you need to be careful because I don't want you to use any nudity or really any skin in your pictures just because it a belly hanging out or something like that. Just please be careful of that stuff when you're taking your pictures just because we're in a public school. Please, no inappropriate content. I don't want any clouds of smoke or anything that gives any paraphernalia type things. No drug reference, nothing showing racism or anything like that, please. Just be careful with that because that stuff can kind of get iffy when other people are looking at your pictures, obviously. You can use your own picture as long as you have permission from the people to use it. So just make sure that whoever you're taking pictures of, they're okay that you're using a picture of them. We don't want anybody saying, no, you used a picture you're not supposed to, because some people can't have pictures taken of them. Again, make sure it's appropriate, especially if it involves kids, and no bathtub or potty shops. I know that you might think it's funny. Here's me in the bathtub or here's me on the potty or something. Please don't do that. Or here's my little brother in the bathtub. Let's just stay away from the bathroom in general, and no diapers or bare buttons, anything like that. Even though they're cute, when it's your brother and stuff, we just can't share any of that with anybody. We just don't want to get anything that's going to be offensive. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take, and I have a couple of slides on this, and what you're going to do is you're going to take these red lines, and you can actually move the red lines when you click on them over. And I want you to practice just doing that with a picture that I have for you. And you're going to just take and you're going to create thirds. You're going to cut this into 3 sections like this. And just move this over if you could, just so that people can kind of see what it looks like and kind of what the rule of thirds is. And so I'll have this all set up for you so that when you do this, you just pull those lines over like this. Now, the biggest question is going to be, Mr. Jensen, how do I upload a picture? I'm going to show you that too as well in the next video, which is how do I get my picture onto this slide and onto this slide? Mr. Jensen, you did put a picture on there for me, and thanks for doing that. But I have 2 slides that I need to put my own pictures on. That'll be the next video for you to watch after this.